champions of Disney's DuckTales video game
for TurboGrafx 16 from NEC.
Genesis, the new generation in video games.
Come on, got quiet, fix that.
It's the video game years, ending the decade with 1989. The systems, the culture, the games. A handheld system enters the scene.
You could game on the go with this weird rectangle white brick.
A globe-trotting duck seeks treasure.
Capcom just nailed it ridiculously.
And Sega starts a console war.
Sega Genesis is the first home console to take a really good shot at emulating the arcade experience at home.
Plus a brawl in the sewers, and a rad accessory for your hand. So build up your neighborhood, but watch out for gators. Press start for 1989.
They said it wasn't humanly possible, but now you can have all the power and excitement of Nintendo right in the palm of your hand. Introducing Game Boy. It's portable, it's in stereo, and its games are interchangeable. Plus, Game Boy comes with the outrageous new game, Tetris. And for head-to-head competition, use the revolutionary video link and blow your opponent away. Game Boy, only from Nintendo. Now you're playing with power, portable power.
There you go, Nintendo. The start of your handheld empire, the Game Boy.
Game Boy is an 8-bit handheld system that was created by Gunpei Yokoi, who was also responsible for the Game & Watch series.
The Game Boy itself is rather large, runs off of 4 AA batteries, and has no backlight and uses a very oddly colored pea soup green type of screen.
You could game on the go with this weird rectangle white brick.
It was made for being portable. You could take it on the subway, you could take it in a car ride, you could drop it, do this and that, and the thing would still keep ticking.
Sound chip, I mean, it has one channel less, but is arguably a better sound chip than the one on the NES.
Oddly, there's a contrast dial on the side where you can turn the contrast up and down. Why would you ever have it on anything but maximum, ever?
So the Game Boy launched with fun games right out the gate.
Of course, you had Super Mario Land, you had Alleyway, which is basically like Breakout, you had tennis, baseball, and of course, Tetris.
Tetris was originally developed by Alexei Pajitnov in the Soviet Union in 1984. He was working as an artificial intelligence engineer for the Soviet Academy of Sciences. And so to test the artificial intelligence of these computer systems, he created this game where basically you had these 4-block puzzle pieces that would come and try to fit them into neat little lines.
Tetris was a game that sort of exploded on the scene, and Tetris overnight became a sensation.
Tetris was secured from both Spectrum Holobyte and Atari spin-off company Tengen.
The rights were being sold back and forth, without any real permission.
It turns out Tetris hadn't been licensed to anyone.
By 1988, you had a bunch of companies basically saying, I have the rights to Tetris, I have the rights to Tetris, because it was a giant cluster. And by that point, the Soviet Union was, okay, we're shut up, all of you, we're actually selling the rights to Tetris now.
But the government officials there did not understand how intellectual property worked, and they asked for way too much money.
Atari comes up and they're like, we would like to buy the rights. And so they buy the rights to arcade versions of Tetris.
Nintendo, having legally gained the rights through Alexei directly, having sent one of their guys over to the Soviet Union to meet with him and to arrange getting the rights, which is really tough to do in the Soviet Union before the Soviet Union had fallen.
Tengen, which was the arm of Atari which created games for the NES, was creating Tetris for the Nintendo Entertainment System without the permission of Nintendo, which had strong clampdown on what could be published on the NES. Eventually, it went to court. Tengen versus Nintendo of America.
Lots of right issues between Atari and Nintendo, going back to Russia and developers and who actually owned the rights to it. huge convoluted mess.
Eventually Nintendo, long story short, won their case.
Tengen lost the battle and had to recall all of its Tetris games.
Because Tetris was packaged in, you would get this demographic that you would probably never ever get launching a video game system, and that's you got adults, you got kids that want to play this game.
This was marketed towards adults, not just children.
Right.
You had businessmen playing this on the go to work, not just kids.
What made the Game Boy popular was its wide appeal and Tetris. I mean, 46% of the console's users were female.
The Game Boy was around for a long time. I always thought it would die out a lot sooner.
A Game Boy that was in use during Desert Storm in 1991 in Kuwait, and it had been through a fire. And the whole casing was charred and black, blah, blah, blah. But you know what? The soldier who had it turned it on afterward, and the dang thing still worked.
This is a system that lasted about 11 years.
The Game Boy competed with the Sega Game Gear, the Atari Lynx, and the Turbo Express, all technically better systems, but it destroyed them.
The main thing the Game Boy proves is that fun wins out over technology.
Sure.
Because it really is an underwhelming piece of hardware to look at until you're given 4 really good cartridges and you realize that you're playing hours later. So basically in Friday the 13th, you play a camp counselor, and you maneuver around Camp Crystal Lake.
And the goal of the game is to find and defeat Jason 3 times before he kills all the kids in the camp.
There's like a Jason alarm that goes off if he's near one, and you have to find your way to the cabin and fight him off.
When you're outside of cabins, it's a side-scrolling game. You jump over little enemies, snakes, you can throw rocks, you can get knives, you can get other sorts of weapons. But the map system makes no sense.
You can be traveling left the whole time on this, side-scrolling image and be going, in reality, 360 degrees. It doesn't translate well to a 3-dimensional world.
When you walk into a cabin, it switches to a pseudo first-person mode. And when you fight Jason, you move left and right and you attack.
This game was not well received, and even Nintendo Power cited it as the 6th worst game ever made.
Nightmare on Elm Street, not nearly as bad as Friday the 13th. Here you are a teenage kid, you're trying to kill Freddy.
The actual goal of the game is to find Freddy's bones and burn them in the furnace at the end of the game.
If you keep getting hit enough, your sleep meter, your Z's will go down and you'll fall asleep. And then you are transported to the exact same house, but in a nightmarish world where Freddy controls and blah, things happen.
You would fight snakes and bats outside of houses, and inside houses you'd fight ghosts and other creatures.
Not a good game per se, but fair. The platforming is decent, and at least you know where you're going, as opposed to Friday the 13th.
Quest for Glory, So You Want to Be a Hero is a hybrid RPG adventure game developed by Sierra Entertainment.
What's so neat about Quest for Glory is it's an attempt to mix a role-playing game with something more like their usual point-and-click adventures.
Sense of realism that was not found in a lot of games at the time. Like there was a day-night cycle and things changed during night, like the setting changed.
The game was criticized for being too time-consuming. The realism had you spending a lot of time trying to build skills.
The more you used a skill, the more experience you got in it. Like if you were a magic user and you used a magic spell, you would get better at it.
So there is fighting. There are classes that you can choose, but there's also the puzzle solving that you've come to expect from Sierra games.
Similarly to King's Quest, Quest for Glory drew inspiration from themes and characters from Legends.
It was a game that was very influential on others later on, and really was a big hit for Sierra at the time.
A Boy And His Blob, Treble on Bloblonia.
A Boy And His Blob was a very interesting game. Again, one of those real experimental titles that was made by David Crane and Gary Kitchen.
The Blob escapes from a planet where the evil emperor only feeds him candy, and comes to Earth and befriends a boy who only feeds him candy.
They wonder what I've been smoking.
The gameplay revolves around feeding your blob different kinds of jelly beans to make him transform so you can progress.
Things like bubblegum or licorice will, change him into like a bowling ball or a ladder or something like that, and you had to really think.
The concept for this game is very original, and I give him a lot of props for that.
I never really got into this game. It was a little too obtuse to me.
There is so much trial and error in this game.
I got lost fairly often in the game, but looking back now, I can really appreciate it.
I had very big plans. I wanted to launch a video game, an animated movie, and a toy line at the same time.
Pat says I talk too much. Use the things the blob turns into to solve puzzles. Save the day!
And now, it should have been a video game in 1989.
Oh, hello, I'm Eric, and here's the stuff from 1989 that should have been made into a video game, but was not. In movies, Blind Fury for the Game Boy. In this unique Twitch-based game, you would have to close your eyes and wear headphones to take advantage of Game Boy's stereo sound, and then listen for audio cues to figure out which direction to swing your sword. The game would of course receive low scores in the graphics department. A Weekend at Bernie's for the Sega Genesis. Keep people from being suspicious as you and your friend try to animate a corpse without getting caught in this stealthy adventure game. What kind of host invites you to his house for the weekend and dies on you? Bernie, that's who. In music, Girl You Know It's True by Milli Vanilli for the Sega Genesis. Ancestor of Parappa the Rapper, the objective would be to lip sync to songs with perfect timing lest you get caught at the cost of your career in this risky rhythm game. Girl you know it's, girl you know it's, girl you know it's, girl you know it's, girl you know it's. In television, America's Funniest Home Videos for the NES. In this precursor to Jackass, you would play as a video submitter trying to win America's Funniest Home Videos by submitting your funniest and most painful accidents. Ow, my groin! I'm just kidding, I meant my balls. And that's what should have been a video game in 1989, and I want to play them.